Welcome to The Link Online. Well, here we are once again in the studio, coming to you live on Facebook and on the RCI Net website. Leo, are we on anywhere else live at this point? What are we on here? YouTube as well. That's it. All right. So we're all over the place.
Oh, all right.
You can find us anywhere.
We've hit the big time.
We've hit the big time indeed.
Used to say. It's just around the corner.
And this is, as I mentioned, The Link Online. I'm Mark Montgomery, and with me today is Lynn Desjardins.
Hello there.
The effervescent Terry Haig.
Hey.
He's just keeping it down.
Lynn hates that. She hates people who say hey.
I hate that when people say hey. I just never got used to it.
Oh.
I'm an old-fashioned girl.
I said it to Pierre Trudeau once on Mountain Street.
Oh, yeah?
On a blustery November day, I'm walking up the street. He's coming around the corner from the Ritz.
Former Prime Minister.
Former Prime Minister, father of our current Prime Minister. It's a really bleak day. And he has that look that happens to people when they're famous and they say, uh-oh, somebody's recognized me.
Uh-oh.
And he's going one way, I'm going the other way, and I just went, hey. And he went, hey. That was my touch of greatness.
Brush with glory, was it?
Yeah.
What was he? Was he wearing a hat?
He was wearing a hat. It was a really one of those November days. It's
but
not fun.
He was a fancy dresser anyway.
Well, so am I.
Oh, well, we can tell.
That's probably why that face came across as well.
Anyway.
I actually got him to give me an English interview one day. I was a junior reporter, and I was the only one with the nerve to go up and ask him to do it all over again, the speech that he had done in French. Made part of my reputation on that. But we digress.
Because on keyboards and social media, Leo Jimeno.
Hi.
Back from a vacation.
Yes.
Good to see you back. In the control room, once again, someone we haven't seen in years. Where have you been hiding, Marie-Claude Picard? He's there. Yes. Good to see you once again. And, of course, deep in the far reaches of the studio, we have our manager of daily operations and the complaints department, Pierre Dutil. Hi, Pierre.
Pierre runs it all, you know.
Please don't complain.
That's what I mean.
He runs everything.
Okay, so coming up in this half hour.
Okay, sorry.
Okay. You're going to do that? Go ahead.
Well, I have an interesting new study shows just because someone wears a business suit no longer means that he or she has a secure job or career.
And I'll tell you about the birth of a pygmy hippo at the Toronto Zoo and why the species is endangered.
And an increasingly controversial debate. A history professor gives a much different perspective on the movement against the founder of Canada and first Prime Minister for his treatment of Aboriginals. We'll have those stories and some of your comments coming up on this edition of The Link Online. All right, Terry, we're going to start with you this week. You're up first.
Okay.
Out of the batter's box
I
there.
found something interesting this week. You know, I always thought that, present company, me accepted, that job security, lack of job security came with low-skilled jobs. In fact, it doesn't.
Those are the kind of jobs that have no benefits as well, right?
Yeah, you don't get a vacation, you don't get sick days, you know. I did an interview with a lady named Trish Hennessy. She co-authored a study for the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives Ontario office called No Safe Harbor, Precarious Work and Economic Insecurity Among Skilled Professionals in Canada. That kind of says it all. Bottom line, a whole lot of so-called professional people are in precarious jobs. I asked Ms. Hennessy what was the most surprising thing she found in doing the study, which was the first of its kind in Canada.
It's funny. A couple of years ago, you saw a lot of reports out there about the rise of precarious work in low-wage jobs. And I got a call from someone who said, is there any research on precarious work among professionals? And so I did the research, and it didn't exist. We didn't know. So we went into the field, and we surveyed professionals across Canada, and what was really surprising was, you know, these are among the most elite workers in our society, and 22% of them are working contract to contract or in part-time jobs or freelance, and they don't have sick pay when they get sick, they don't have benefits, and they don't have a workplace pension plan. These are all the hallmark characteristics of precarious work in Canada, and it's seeping into the professions now. And when you think about that, everybody is told, hey, you want to make it out there in this precarious labor market, go to school, get an education, get specialized credentials, become a professional, and then you'll have access to steady, permanent work and economic security. And in fact, 1 in 5 professionals in Canada don't.
How does this come to be, Ms. Hennessy?
It's a really good question. What's driving precarious work in the labor market? Well, essentially, employers are deciding to offer people contracts and to not offer benefits and pension plans. And it started out mostly in the private sector about a decade or so ago. And now it's even spilling into the public sector. We found that 30% of those precarious professionals work in the public sector. So, those are university faculty who aren't being offered tenured permanent positions anymore. Those are nurses who are going contract to contract. And these are public sector workers that every time you have a government saying we're going to make spending cuts, it's time for austerity, it's those professionals whose jobs are on the line.
That was part of my interview with Trish Hennessy, who is the Ontario Director for Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives. She co-authored the report with Ricardo Trahan, No Safe Harbour, Precarious Work and Economic Insecurity Among Skilled Professionals in Canada. It's on the website. There's all sorts of links there. It's remember when people will get a job for life? That was everybody's ambition. If you heard the stats, there almost 1 out of 4 people, 22%. Or a little over 1 out of 5 people.
Yeah, almost a quarter of the working power, yeah.
Yeah, don't have any benefits. It's not a pretty picture.
No, it's actually quite scary. And as she said, you get sick or God forbid, injured or something, you're suffering because there's no income anymore.
Yeah.
And as you pointed out, Lynn, this is a situation that's becoming more and more common.
That's right. Kids now coming out of university and so on are not getting full-time jobs at all. They have no benefits. Too bad, as you say, if you're sick. And these are professionals. My daughter's in translation. Yep. And people say, you'll have people say, oh, the kids, this generation prefers that. They like it better because it's flexible. Poppycock.
Who are the ones saying that?
Exactly, the employers.
These are the ones with the secure incomes. And
yes,
so on.
Exactly.
All right, once again, if you have any thoughts on that, feel free to drop us a line here at RCI on that subject. Well, this is a subject that is becoming more and more controversial in Canada. The father of Confederation and Canada's first Prime Minister was Sir John A. Macdonald, and he was long venerated for his lead role in creating this country. A lot of statues have been erected in cities across the country to remember this role. Dozens, if not hundreds, of schools and perhaps other institutions have been named after him as well. But of late, a movement has grown to remove his name and his statues because of his role in creating the Aboriginal residential schools. Now, I won't go into an explanation about what that is because there's plenty of information about the residential schools in stories on our website and elsewhere. But suffice to say, it turned out very badly indeed, often tragically, for the Aboriginal community in this country. However, several historians have said these groups advocating for blaming Macdonald are taking things out of context and rewriting history. Recently, the West Coast city of Victoria removed their statue of Macdonald. I spoke to Frédéric Bastien, author and history professor at Dawson College in Montreal, and in this excerpt, I asked first what he thought about this movement against the memory of Sir John A. Macdonald.
Actually, the people involved into these claims of removing statues are not interested in the history of the country. They're not interested in reconciliation as they claim they are. Actually, what they're doing and what they aim at doing is to basically destroy our common culture or heritage, and in a way that society will make no sense anymore for Canadians. The only thing that this will create is discord, dispute, and pitch people against one another. It's the last thing you want to do if you want to reconcile a society is to do things like this.
Well, Mr. Bastien, what do you say to those people's claims that he shouldn't be honored because of his role in the tragic residential school system?
The Indian policy of his government was actually the same policy pursued later by the Liberals. It was a policy that everybody agreed with, and he was completely in line with what the rest of the country thought and what the opposition thought, what everybody thought. And they all thought that for the sake of the natives, assimilation through residential schools was going to be a good thing. They honestly, genuinely, and sincerely thought that this was going to be a good thing.
So are we rewriting the past in a way, or simply taking things out of context? Because if I remember correctly, Sir John A. Macdonald also was the one who wanted to give First Nations the vote, the franchise at the time, which was not a popular move.
Yeah, you're completely right to point out that the context is completely forgotten in this. By these, the groups pushing for removal of statues are not interested in knowledge. They're not interested in history. For his time, Johnny Macdonald was a relatively tolerant person in a century that was not exactly tolerant compared with the criteria of today. But if you compare him with the people of his time, as you pointed out, he was in a way open to certain claims for the natives. But again, he was not the only one thinking the way he was at that time. So of course, the context is completely forgotten by those who are attacking his memory. And what they're really trying to do is to destroy our collective memory.
Well, what do you say about the fact that the Minister of Canada has recently said that he will name a federal holiday to remember the residential school system?
I think that this is masochistic. Now, if you want to have a holiday for the native peoples or native First Nations in Canada and call it National Holiday for Native People, I think very few Canadians will disagree with this. That would make, that would be fine. I'm sure a lot of people would be in agreement with this. Now, if you want to tie this to the residential schools, I think that then it becomes a problem. Now, because you want to instill a sense of guilt in the people, and this is not the way to move forward. Now, the way Johnny Macdonald is being discussed is almost like if he was Stalin. There's an Orwellian tone to this debate. I think this is a scandal.
And that was a portion of my conversation with Frédéric Bastien, PhD, and history professor at Dawson College in Montreal, and the full interview is in our highlights section. And if you've been watching the screen there, you've seen a lot of statues of Macdonald, those that haven't been removed. Vandals come along and paint them with red paint as a sign of their displeasure with this past, and so on and so forth. So that's a history professor who says, you're taking this history out of context. You're trying to do things, rewrite history in a way. So it's a controversial subject, and again, if you have thoughts on that, drop us a line. And the comments section on all RCI stories is open for your comments, and they will be moderated and then posted online. Coming up, some of your letters, in fact. All right, it's time now on the program for some of your responses to recent stories that we have posted online. And starting out, we continue to get lots of feedback to our stories on the blood pressure drug valsartan. There has been 2 class action lawsuit requests launched. These are not class action suits yet. These are requests to launch a class action suit. And I should stress that for as far as we know, the requests in Canada and the province of Quebec are still at this stage. And several people have written to us saying they want to be included. So if so, you should contact the law firm mentioned in the article. Now, meanwhile, Todd wrote to one of our stories about valsartan this.
I am very worried because I've been on it for a year now. Count me in on the lawsuit. I have all the symptoms they described, writes Todd.
Another posting on the same subject from Pauline Frigo reads in part,
I have been taking valsartan by Civem since 2015. I'm 49. I've been experiencing all kinds of symptoms. I've been feeling awful for a few years now with sleepless nights, stomach pains, joint pains, numbness, burning, shortness of breath, depression, bristling of my hair, always feeling tired, and now kidney infection, something I never had before, and always nauseated, often lightheaded, and trouble concentrating. For years I've been feeling this way to a point that I felt I was losing my mind. When I found out about valsartan recall, I had all sorts of mixed emotions. Now it makes so much sense why I was feeling this way. I was not losing my mind. This is not okay. Their action has affected many lives in a very negative way. Greed and the mighty dollar on other people's expense. I want to be part of this class action lawsuit all the way.
And again, we've had several comments posted on the various stories about valsartan. So just one more, this one from Dennis Wilt, who's probably an American.
I have been taking valsartan for several years and am concerned about the physical effects of the medicine since it has been recalled and would like to submit a request to become a claimant in the class action lawsuit. I hope, as an American citizen, that I am eligible. If I am not, please provide me with information where I can seek legal help.
And once again, just to remind people, first, if they have been taking valsartan, speak to your doctor or pharmacist about the situation and the recalls. And as for legal action, again, a class action request has been filed in Canada, and people should contact the legal firm in the article update. As for Americans, I'm not sure of what the legal situation is in the United States. Moving on, we also had several replies to the story of Montreal City Council voting to request the federal government ban all handguns. Drawer22, who is likely an American, commented,
Canada is just now addressing possession of assault rifles owned by civilians. Had I known that civilian ownership of them was an option in Canada, I might well have opted to move to Canada and become a Canadian citizen. I had no idea that such freedom is permissible in Canada. Who needs a handgun when one can have and carry a machine gun in downtown Montreal?
Well, the answer to that is quite simple. You cannot. You can't own or buy an automatic fire-capable gun in Canada, period. And you haven't been able to do that for several decades. Many types of handguns are also banned outright, and you cannot carry a handgun anywhere. Handguns can only be transported to a proper shooting club range. And on the same subject, Dennis Young wrote,
The Liberal government is playing dishonest games with statistics to crack down on legal gun owners, while the Liberal Party sees gun control as a possible wedge issue. StatsCan simply has no evidence to support their claims, and then Dennis included a link to a news story supporting his comment.
All right, and on this same story of Montreal City Council asking the federal government to ban handguns, a quick comment from Charles.
Welcome to the banana country, Canada. I think he meant the Banana Republic, which is a common term.
Yeah. Now, there were other posts to the story, but let's move on to others. We had a comment this week to a story from over a year ago that the RCMP, which is the National Police, was relaxing their entrance requirements, and Wayne Flewelling commented.
The RCMP did not just relax their requirements, they removed them altogether. Today, you can join Canada's National Police Force without even a face-to-face interview. So, in other words, it is harder to get a job at a burger joint. That is not modernization, no matter what RCMP brass says.
All right, and then finally, a post about the movement we mentioned earlier against the memory of Sir John A. Macdonald, and the story, Statue of Canada's First Prime Minister removed in Victoria, BC. Josh Baldwin wrote this.
What a joke, what a joke. Should put up a statue of Justin Trudeau so I can tear it down. People are losing their minds.
On that note, we'll end our comments for this section of the program. And, of course, as always, the comments are open on all RCI stories. You just scroll down to the bottom of the page and submit your comment there. Moderators will look at it, and it will be posted afterwards if it meets the general posting guidelines, of common sense and politeness and so on and so forth. All right, coming up, a good news story.
we're very excited. We had a birth August 10th.
Wait. I have to tell you about it first. This is a story about an endangered species called a pygmy hippopotamus. It's about a quarter of the size of the hippo that we're used to seeing. They don't usually reproduce in captivity, so the birth earlier this month was a really big deal for the Toronto Zoo. I saw a very nice video of mom and baby posted on our website, and for details about the birth, I reached Maria Frank. She is curator of mammals at the Toronto Zoo.
We're very excited. We had a birth August 10th of a pygmy hippo. Pygmy hippos are classified as endangered, and we are part of what's called a species survival plan. So the whole premise of that is that we work collectively with our zoological colleagues where we will breed based on genetics so that we can have a healthy genetic population. Along with that, also public awareness and just bringing the plight of the pygmy hippo in the wild.
These are pygmy hippos, but how heavy would you say mom is?
So that's one thing about pygmy hippos is a lot of people don't really know that they exist. They're a very solitary, secretive forest creature that comes from West Africa, primarily Liberia, but also small populations in the Ivory Coast, Sierra Leone, and Guinea. And they're around the quarter of a size of a river hippo. And river hippos are what most people recognize, big pods of social large hippos living in the rivers of Africa. So pygmy hippo adults average anywhere from 180 to 275 kilograms, whereas river hippos anywhere from 1,300 to 1,500 kilograms. So that gives you a really good scope on the size difference between a river hippo and a pygmy hippo.
And how heavy was the baby?
So the baby, when it was born, well, the day after it was born, the vets processed it just to make sure that it was fine and healthy and sexed it, so it's a little girl. But the day after, it weighed 5.48 kilograms, so kind of around roughly the size of a football. And the wildlife care staff actually weighed her yesterday, and she's around 8.7 kilograms. So she's putting on weight and doing very well.
And how's mom?
Mom's doing amazing. So this is, again, first-time mom raising a calf, and that can always be tricky. You don't know if the instincts kick in, and her instincts kicked in immediately. So both mom and baby are doing very well. Will
both hippos stay at the Toronto Zoo?
Once the baby's weaned and old enough to be isolated on her own, very likely there'll be an SSP recommendation for the calf to go and get paired with her own mate so that she can then proceed to breed and hopefully have offspring of her own.
How many of these kinds of hippopotamuses exist in the world?
Right now, there's estimated to be around 2,000 to 3,000 left in the wild, so hence they're listing as endangered, so that's not a lot of animals. And it's primarily because of habitat loss due to the ever-increasing human population, so encroaching on wild habitat, logging. And when logging occurs, logging roads give easier access for hunters into the far reaches of the forest. So unfortunately, they are hunted as a meat source, so they're hunted and poached for bush meat.
Back to the hippos that are at the Toronto Zoo. Unfortunately, you cannot see them yet. The first 30 days are critical to the survival of newborn mammals, so they're being, kept in a quieter place. Now, assuming that both do well, mom and baby will eventually be put out where the public can see them. And also, the baby has not been named yet. So the zoo is actually mulling over a contest to name her, which would also serve to raise awareness about the breed of pygmy hippos. Zoo personnel are currently sorting out the details of how that contest would work. So if you want to, you can always go on the Toronto Zoo's website, and I'm sure there'll be all kinds of publicity, and people can submit their suggestions for the naming of the baby pygmy hippo.
Well, she mentioned something in that article about I think it was the SSP. What is that? It's an international.
It's a North American species protection program, and so what the zoos do is they trade information and they also trade animals so that they can breed them. And so it's particularly for endangered species. They try to make them reproduce in the zoos to try to get the populations up. And that's
and mix the DNA.
And in fact that Kindia, the mom in this one, was brought over from France in order to sort of change up the genetic pool, because the North American animals, they've been breeding closely, so they wanted to bring in that animal from Europe. And of course, Europe, many countries around the world have similar programs. So, the internet makes all these programs able to communicate with each other and then coordinate trading up animals to try to keep them going.
It sounds like they have somewhat the same problem in Africa as what we've mentioned several times here in Canada regarding logging roads and development roads into wilderness areas, which allow easier access to people and predators. So
predators as well.
Yeah.
Hunters, not only human predators, but other hunters as well. Yeah. It's a problem all over the world.
All right, we're going to take a look at some of the other stories that we had coming up. Do we have a musical interlude? We do? Yeah, okay. Let's try that. There we go. All right, there we go. A little bit of nice music there. And a couple of other interesting stories we had this week. Lynn, what about you?
Well, we've reported fairly often about the real problem with illegal drug overdoses. It all started in the western province of British Columbia, and things are so bad there that one regional health authority is now going to offer online skills training on how to reverse an overdose using the drug naloxone. So Fraser Health is inviting, that's in Western Canada, is inviting people to join an online demonstration and live chat session on August 27th, 2018 at 1 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time, which is UTC -7. The conversations and drill will continue leading up to International Overdose Awareness Day, which I did not know was on August 31st. Now, since the British Columbia government declared a public health emergency in April 2016, almost 3,000 people have died from taking too much street drug. And, of course, the problem has spread right across the country to the extent that the Canadian government decided as of March 2016 that these rescue kits, the naloxone kits, could be purchased in drugstores. You don't even need a prescription. Fraser Health has given out tens of thousands of them, and they're encouraging people, even if you have a kit, to go online and sort of just refresh your mind on how to use those kits, how to recognize the signs that someone's having an overdose, and then how to rescue them.
All right. Now, I had a story. Leo, our internet guru there, see if you can find a picture of my story on the Avro Arrow. Now, you know the story. Do you know the Avro Arrow? You're from away, so you wouldn't know.
No, I know the Avro. I mean, it's your fallback position, Montgomery.
Well, no.
When you're lacking a story, we get the Avro Arrow.
Well, because it's been... there it is.
Interesting.
I mean, this was an absolutely astounding aircraft for its time in the late 50s. Well, it was. And
you're funny. Man.
No, it was destroyed. The government destroyed this thing. And that has created all these conspiracy myths, and there's been movies made about it. The Americans didn't want it because it was far better than anything they had. So the conspiracy goes that they conspired to get it destroyed so it wouldn't be competing with their jet aircraft. Anyway, so what's happening in the last little while is that during the development there was these large models about 3 meters long that were fired out over Lake Ontario on top of rockets to test the aerodynamics of this radical new supersonic design. And people have been looking for these things for decades. And finally they found one, and they brought one up this week.
Oh, they did?
Yeah, they found
Finally,
one.
Okay.
Yeah, and actually they found two, but they brought the first one up. So, I mean, people are all very excited about that because this is kind of the last physical remnant of this incredible aircraft. Okay. The other aspect of this story that I discovered as well in researching the first story was this thing, this full-scale replica of the Avro Arrow was built by some people at a museum in Toronto. It doesn't fly, of course, but that's exactly how this plane looked, and they built this magnificent full-scale replica. It was in the museum for a while. Then the museum got closed, and they trucked the replica out to the Pearson Airport and stuck it in a corner. It's been sitting outside deteriorating ever since. And the people who spent all this time building this thing are saying, yeah, come on, this is a beautiful thing. Why are you letting it rot and fall apart? We spent so much, 7 years building this thing. So that's a bit of the story of this incredible, iconic aircraft that the Americans didn't want. Did they,
Terry? Look at me for. My father came up and served in the RCAF.
Well, there you go.
That's mine.
Where was? Do you know?
Who? Where?
Where?
In Europe and India.
Oh, what time was that?
Between 1941 and 1945.
Oh, he was in the RCF. What, was he a flyer? Was he a mechanic?
He was a pilot and a navigator.
In what
Wow.
aircraft?
Cool.
Catalina.
Really?
Yeah.
You know, there's one of those. I know where there is one of those. In a
I bet
hangar.
you do.
In a hangar.
You know all things military, Montgomery.
It's a secret, apparently.
What about those assault weapons? Oh, rifles. No.
Well, you know, the thing I learned about Catalinas is the pilot didn't control he only controlled the fly. He didn't control the engines. That was controlled by your dad sitting up in a pylon up top.
Okay.
Which I thought is amazing. But there you go. Anyway, that's all the time we have for today. Little known facts.
What a finish.
What a finish. For Terry, Leo, Lynn, and Marie-Claude, and Pierre, I'm Mark Montgomery. Take care until next time. Bye-bye.
Bye.